All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LeBuff here with you. We've got Coach Dustin, Coach Brad. Listen, tonight we're going to have a really good conversation, maybe even a slight debate. I think either way we're going to shed some really interesting insights onto this subject. And the subject tonight is War of Attrition versus War of Annihilation. And I think you're going to pull some gems out of this. So stick with us, and we'll be back after our intro. Hey everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LeBuff, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, okay, so today we're talking War of Attrition versus War of Annihilation. This is something that, right, I mean, from the very first day that I started the weaponizing process, again, you know, my instructors were fresh out of working with the SEAL teams. The War of Attrition was a new concept, a concept I'd never heard of. And of course, it stands to reason that if I'd never heard of the strategy of War of Attrition, then I had not heard, and was not familiar with the tactics and many of the tools. So I just thought this would be a really, really fun conversation to dive into tonight, because the opposite of attrition-based warfare is annihilation-based warfare, and that I was familiar with. And matter of fact, I know this is going to be contradictory, but ultimately I was familiar with both. I just didn't know it. Okay, so attrition-based warfare is pretty big in the weaponizing community. Before I throw it to you guys and just get your visceral takes on this, let's just set up for those that are listening and watching. What is the difference? What is attrition-based warfare? Attrition-based warfare, generally speaking, is where you basically wear your enemy down until complete collapse. So think of it like Chinese water torture. It is literally like a single drop, just repetitively hitting in the same spot. And at first it might seem like this is nothing, this isn't going to bother me. And then, 15 minutes in, 5 hours in, it'll drive you mad. So it's just wearing the enemy down until complete collapse. And now for a lot of people, like I was back in the day, they might not see how attrition-based warfare is possible in the short, chaotic burst that violent assaults tend to happen in, right? Because people think, they just, 0 to 100 and it can be over in a matter of a few seconds. That's true. But attrition-based warfare is entirely possible if you understand the strategy, tactics, and tools. So that's attrition-based is wearing them down. Annihilation-based, most people are more familiar with this, and that is literally the destruction of the enemy through overwhelming force, right? So that makes sense, right? Just most people are like, oh, okay, I get that. So that's what we're going to delve in tonight, attrition versus annihilation. And Dustin, Brad, anything right off the hop that you guys, visceral responses to this?
Yeah. For me, the first thing that hit me was just like you said, first of all, like, was there an awareness of the war of attrition prior to weaponizing or not? And what was your previous experiences with annihilation or attrition? And for me, I'll start with the War of Annihilation, and of course it was different terminology, and it was more just the mindset, not this specific terminology. But as you guys know, I did years and years of traditional martial arts, got the black belt, did all that stuff, and that's not combat by any stretch. But even just in that martial arts setting, I mean, it was a war of annihilation. Like, if you were going to win, you had to be better than the other person. It helped if you were bigger and stronger too, but you for sure had to be better. And that's literally all it was about. It was like, can you overwhelm this other person with superior skill and maybe possibly size, strength, all of that? And this might also surprise people. I wasn't the best. I wasn't the biggest. I wasn't the strongest. And so I didn't win every time. And so, right away it's like, well, how good is this for me? Like, especially trying to take it into a survival, mindset or situation. Is like, I'm not even the best, like, in doing this, like, in the club, let alone on a bigger scale than just one small town little club. And so right away I was like, yeah, this doesn't work for me. So then when I had kind of my awakening, if you will, into the weaponizing process and understanding that, like, oh man, yeah, there's a different way. And then that's that war of attrition. And then, my first true experience with the war of attrition, or at least the necessity for it, was my very first class in weaponizing. And it was back in the university days, big group class kind of setting. And I mean, what did you guys do? The very first thing we did was you guys grabbed chairs and you chased us around swinging chairs at us, put the chairs down, picked up machetes, you're swinging machetes. And very quickly you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I'm not always going to be the best. I'm not going to be the biggest. I'm not going to be the strongest. There's going to be multiple people. They might have weapons. Like, and just very quickly it made me realize, like, yeah, it's not about overwhelming this person or these people with force and strength, power, skill. I'm like, I need a different strategy. And that was War of Attrition for sure.
Awesome. It's perfect. Bradley.
Yeah, similar but different to Dustin. For me, my very first exposure to self-defense is the weaponizing process, right? And so when I first had that exposure was very much through the lenses of War of Attrition being presented to me in that manner. And that was one of the major things of why I gravitated, because it resonated so true to me, not growing up as the biggest kid in school, not the strongest kid, not the fastest kid. I've always kind of felt that I was that smaller, weaker person. So when I got exposed to weaponizing through that lens of like, if you're the smaller, weaker person, because no matter how big and strong that you are, you're always going to be outmanned and outgunned. We could create a situation, I don't care who you are, where you're outmanned and outgunned. So it really resonated with me. And when you first kind of started the introduction, Greg, is the one thing that really shifting to not where I first came through the door, but where I am now is survivable value. It's the mindset that is going to save your ass at the end of the day because of survival value and what survival value is placed on War of Attrition versus War of Annihilation. Again, like I said, you could always create a situation where you're going to be the weaker, smaller, inferior person. So what strategies and tactics are you going to be able to employ? But you got to have that mindset shift because you can't tap into the other tactics because they're just not going to work.
Perfect. Really great points from both you guys. And I think the thing that I can highlight off that is that right away, you guys are both setting a context for people, right? And so remember, context determines the content. And the context that you guys are both talking about is the buzzwords are outgunned, outmanned, they're bigger, they're stronger, there's more of them, they're better equipped, they achieve better position on me, all that type of stuff, which is all things that are, very prone in violence, right? If you look at the combative arts or fighting arts for the most part, especially if you go into the sport context, which most people are like, well, that is the ultimate pinnacle of what is real, right? Because you're seeing them in the ring, you're seeing them in the octagon, and they're out there doing it. But they're not outgunned, they're not outmanned, they're not out-equipped, and they're not out-positioned. Take all four of those elements and wipe them off the table because they have a weight class. Unless you're at a very, very amateur level, you know who you're fighting, you have signed contracts, you have a predetermined date. If you should have a cold or a mild injury even, you can postpone, you can cancel, you can withdraw. You are announced, you start on each side, you bring a team of people with you, you have a fight camp. All of the things go on and on. And the only reason I'm saying that is because, you're bringing sport brings certainty. Okay, so that's just to say that, you don't necessarily need the attrition-based warfare the same way. Now, let me answer this though, because I set this up as War of Attrition versus War of Annihilation, as if it's like which one is better. Well, here's let's end the suspense for everybody. You need them both. Like you have to have them both. You have to understand attrition-based warfare, and there's a time and a place where attrition-based warfare is the smartest thing in the world to do, and it is the only thing that'll save you. And then there is a point in time, and there is a circumstance or situation where you need to understand annihilation-based warfare. Now that seems black and white, where people go, "Oh, okay, that makes more sense." But most people won't actually understand what the elements are, especially as it pertains to violence. That what's the context of how you integrate those together? It's like if I said this, most people think Like if you go to JKD Jeet Kune Do and stuff, right, what Bruce Lee did, most people think that that was an eclectic approach, meaning that, you know, what he did was study kicking arts, punching arts, you know, close quarter trapping arts, and then ground fighting arts. And then you just took the best of each of these arts and you just put them together. But that's actually not true, because that would be an eclectic approach, which is why a lot of people go, oh, I train 7 different martial arts or 8 different martial arts. Well, that can be a massive detriment to you, because it's you've got all this knowledge, right? And remember, it's not a daily increase, it's a daily decrease that you're after. And so you study 7 arts and 7 different black belts, but who's teaching you how to put these things together? The most functional things out of one art don't necessarily seamlessly integrate into the most functional things out of another art. So you become very clunky. Your reaction time becomes very slow because you're inundated with all this shit. You're literally increasing. Whereas what Bruce Lee did with the help of Dan and Asanto was he developed a framework. And so he could have something say, listen, the core is XYZ, right? Most people think it's Wing Chun. There was Western hand fencing. There's all these, you know, actually 28 different martial arts that he pulled from. But if you take one art, like art number 1 that he pulled from, and then you go to art number 13. In art number 13, when they were looking at that, studying that, breaking that down, the most functional things out of art 13 might not have made it into his system. The most functional thing that integrated with art number 1 is what made it. So it's not eclectic. Now, the whole reason I go on that tangent was just because War of Attrition versus War of Annihilation, it's not enough just to go, I know how to wear the guy down. I know some attrition-based strategies, tactics, and tools. I know that. And then go, I also understand annihilation. I know how to whoop ass and fucking, you know, completely destroy with overwhelming force. I get that. So I have both those things, so I'm good to go. It's like, actually, when you're looking at violence, when I said that you have to understand when you have to be able to seamlessly integrate attrition and annihilation. A matter of fact, attrition-based warfare is the impetus that actually allows the smaller, weaker person to execute the War of Annihilation. So if you don't understand, if you don't have the framework for how these things not just integrate, but synergize each other, right? And I'll repeat that. The attrition-based strategies, tactics, and tools are specifically selected and designed, and when they are executed, they are the impetus that turns your fighting, your annihilation-based skill sets into functional force, right? So if you were just to separate that, go back to what you guys said, if you're the smaller, you're the weaker, you're outnumbered, you're outpositioned, you're out-equipped, if you just think, you know, there's a point when you go, oh, take the guy with the biggest fucking mouth and annihilate him. That's not going to work very well. It's eclectic. It's random. If you know what I mean? So you got to understand, like, to me, it's like doing an alley-oop in basketball. You might have the vertical to jump high and slam, but you need the setup. You need someone to, you know, put the ball up so that you can alley-oop it, right? There's a connectedness, a process with this. Okay, so this is kind of what I want to talk about. What I want to share with people is like, what does this actual game plan look like? So let's just take it in segments, and then I'll talk more about how we set them up. So let's start with attrition-based warfare. Okay, so attrition-based warfare is how you wear somebody down. I think we've already set up the understanding as to, well, why would I even need to consider this? Because you're outgunned, outmanned, right? They have superior numbers, like they have the superior equipment, they get the drop on the superior positioning. You are the smaller, weaker force. So you can't just annihilate your way out of that. You need the attrition-based warfare. So what are some of the strategies? And you guys can be as specific or as general as you'd like. That's up to you. But what are some of the ways that a smaller, weaker individual, when they are facing bigger, stronger, superior forces, all that stuff, what are some of the attrition-based either strategies, tactics, or tools that a person can use to help them survive that situation?
Well, the first thing that comes into my mind is the strategies that we use if we have a posturing predator that we're facing with us, or that is faced in front of us, is, you know, not the attrition mindset where you're like, I'm going to posture back, I'm going to stand toe to toe, I'm going to show you that I'm bigger and stronger, but also the very opposite of that, right? Which is what we call the Trojan horse. how do we present an energy in front of somebody who is rude, aggressive, dangerous, potentially violent individual that allows us to um, steal the initiative and, you know, create a moment of opportunity where we could use speed, surprise, and violence of action, right? We use that Trojan horse tactic because we're outmanned, we're outgunned, and in that particular situation, that's a tool that allows us to be able to launch our attack from.
Perfect. Okay, now, what you actually said, I'm going to clarify because you actually said this, but I'm going to actually break it down so people can see what I'm talking about understanding the framework of things. What you talked about before you talked about the Trojan horse strategy, what you said is that, you described the posturing side of things, right? So you have somebody that's in front of you, the bigger, stronger, so if you got people and they're bigger and they're stronger and they have superior weapons and all this type of stuff, and yet they posture, they start threatening you because they know. They say, listen, motherfucker, give me this, give me that, whatever it is. Like, that's what a lot of them do. They start pontificating, right? There's a precursor to all the physical shit. That's the posturing predator. The other side of that is there's a blitzer. They don't fucking talk, they just fucking blitz. But you were talking specific about a posturing predator. But so what you did was describe the fact that they're going through this fucking pontificating. They're going through this posturing. Now, why would a violent criminal who has superior numbers, superior firepower, all that, superior equipment, superior position, all that shit, why the fuck are they going to spend their time pontificating? Well, they're going to do that because they have learned, right, through experience, that when a man is so fucking overwhelmed and outnumbered and outgunned and all that type of stuff, that if he postures, he'll get the other guy to submit. The other guy will go like, "Oh fuck, you're terrified, you're shit," and you go, "Listen, if these guys decide to go, I'm fucking dead. I don't even know if I'll survive this." And so they get what they want. So damage limitation, they posture, they get status display, and they profit from that, and so they get what they want. Now, what you also said was that when these guys start posturing, well, viscerally, what happens to people, especially untrained people? They either submit, shit and piss themselves, which is, fine, physiological response, or they start posturing back. Somebody gets in your fucking face. Now, let's just make this simple. It's one guy, but he's a big fucking guy. He's got a knife on him, got a gun on him, whatever the fuck it is, got a lead pipe in his hand, big guy. You can tell. His energy tells you this motherfucker's been in a tussle or two in his day. Okay? Well, when that happens and somebody starts fucking beaking you and pushing buttons, a lot of guys visually, if they don't submit, they'll posture back. They start fucking cussing him out and saying everything back to him, and it's just monkey see, monkey fucking douche bullshit. So the first thing you need isn't a Trojan horse strategy. The first thing you need is control. Your inner control has to be there. You actually have to be able to regulate your response to this. Because either way, if you viscerally, somebody calls you a motherfucker and all of a sudden like, what the fuck did you just say? And you start posturing up, there was no control, there was just reaction. And amateurs react, professionals respond, right? Or take action. Trained and restrained, premeditated, tactical, surgical. So the inner control box becomes one of the first key elements if you're going to do war of attrition. You know how hard it is for most men to admit that they're not the superior force? Very difficult. Especially when all of a sudden somebody starts fucking with you in front of your peers or in front of your loved ones. Very difficult for people to feign submission, to feign vulnerability, in whatever form that takes. So the first thing that actually has to be there for war of attrition, imagine you got two countries. And the one country goes, fuck you to the other country. Does something. Crosses borders, takes land, whatever the fuck it does. And that country who has, who received that insult just goes, fuck you, and starts marching fucking, dropping missiles, marching fucking soldiers in. You get what I mean? It's like, you can see where War of Annihilation breaks out. It's easy. Because there's you got to save face. So the first thing that has to happen is strategic and surgical control. So that's our inner control box. Okay? Now the second thing then Brad went on to say, okay, Trojan horse. Well, the Trojan horse strategy, remember at its core, is falsehood precedes reality. We just did a podcast on this a couple back. Falsehood precedes reality. That's what it is. So war of attrition, you start going, I got to wear this motherfucker down. Deception's going to be a massive part of this, especially in a small short-term engagement like this. We're not talking about sustained warfare over, a year, let alone, we're talking about we're talking about seconds, maybe minutes. So falsehood precedes reality. That is an attrition-based strategy. If you're ever going to do that, you have to have an inner control box. You actually have to be able to regulate your response. Okay? So, and I'll just back up even more because you guys talked about that, attrition-based warfare is a mindset. 100%. Well, that mindset will never activate unless we can regulate our responses to things and stop being reactive to things. Okay, so those were two great points. Control, and then falsehood precedes reality, or Trojan horse. Dustin, anything you want to either add on to that or throw in new?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can move on to another strategy. There's several, but one would be like destructions. So my favorite thing about destructions is just the saying we have with that goes along with it is, "You try to hit me, I hurt you." And I like that mindset because it obviously very much fits into this war of attrition kind of mindset where, just for people who don't know, like a destruction, if you have a boxer, let's say a kickboxer or whatever, if someone's coming at them punching, of course they've got their hands up, but they're going to be parrying and they're going to be bobbing and weaving and moving their head, and like that stuff's all good and that stuff's all important, but all of that stuff is just, it's evasive, it's more defensive in a sense. And yes, I mean, you can move to position to throw a punch or whatever, but essentially it's very defensive in a way. Whereas with a destruction, it's like that concept of, you try to hit me, I'm going to hurt you. And so we're still going to have our hands up potentially. We're going to be still moving our heads, getting off center. But at the same time, we're doing it in such a way that we can lift an elbow and have that replace the line that our head was once in. So now when they try to hit, they're punching into the tip of that elbow. It's like punching into a piece of mahogany wood. You're looking to shatter knuckles, break fingers, metacarpals, jam wrists, all that stuff. So it's like they're now paying a price for trying to throw that punch down your center line. And again, we're not bigger, we're not stronger. So why would we sit there and try to outpunch this person? We've established that they're going to hit harder, they're going to be faster, they're going to be more explosive, more power, just better everything. They're going to hit better and more skilled. So you can't just outpunch someone who's better at punching. So you have to make them pay a price for doing that, and then use that to your advantage by weakening them over time to then create an opportunity to where you can shift to, like you said earlier, from that war of attrition into that war of annihilation and bring more to bear.
100%. A great concept, right? Right into attrition-based, the destructions. And the only thing I'm going to add to this is that this destructions, although not a part of conventional combative sport, we have seen the effects of what happens when heavy hitters, strikers, throw punches or throw kicks and inadvertently, like accidentally, run into the tips of elbows or into the tips of knees. And you see shins, being fractured and legs being, snapped back. You see metacarpals being destroyed. Matter of fact, I remember watching a fight with Roy Jones Jr., and he was beating the guy so bad, and he was talking to the ref, telling the ref to stop the fight. The ref wouldn't stop the fight. And so what he started doing was he purposely stopped punching the guy in the head because he actually was worried that he was going to seriously injure this guy. And every time the guy threw a punch, Roy Jones would punch him in the bicep. And it literally took less than a round. I think it was just, a round and a half. And the guy literally had to, the fighter stopped. And not because he was taking the headshots. He didn't stop because he was taking headshots. He stopped because he could no longer extend his arm out because the bicep was so bruised up. That's an example of destruction. That was an example of a war of attrition, right? And this is maybe just a good point to put this in. War of attrition and war of annihilation are both present in combat sports today. We have all seen, I said at the beginning of that, they try to make fights equal. You want, fights to be, a weight class, relative in experience, all this type of stuff. But of course, there's always fights that happen where there's a mismatch, where you got a 20 or 30 pound weight advantage in one guy, or you got experience, or whatever it is. Like there's all kinds of things that can cause inequalities, even in combative sports. And you look at Muhammad Ali had the rope-a-dope. You know what I mean? there's lots of examples of how professional fighters use attrition based, like they just start trying to wear the guy down. This happens in jiu-jitsu a lot. Right in the beginning, the Gracies, Hoist would, he wore a gi when most fighters didn't wear the gi because he could dry the sweat off, and that way it allowed him to grip better on him. But the Gracies were always like, it's like when you cook a turkey, the bigger the bird, the more meat, the longer it takes to cook him. The bigger the man, the longer it takes to cook him. So there is absolutely examples of attrition-based concepts, strategies, tactics, and tools inside of conventional combative sports. They're probably not referred to a lot that way, but they do exist for sure. And then, of course, there's the annihilation side of it. You can have a fighter that is grinding and just, staying really tight and close on the ground and just grinding another fighter till he just hits a certain point of exhaustion. And then all of a sudden that guy gives up a position, and that fighter that was grinding, being very attrition-based, wearing the guy down until collapse, sits up and starts a vicious barrage of ground and pound. Well, there you go, attrition and annihilation, and the attrition synergistically or set up the opportunity for annihilation. But it's a very unique thing for a fighter to actively do that and just be like, no, this is my strategy because this person I'm fighting is very, very skilled. Maybe they're even better than me. Maybe they're a little bigger than me, a little faster than me, whatever it happens to be. So I just wanted to make that point. So the destructions are a very, very viable, strategy, tactic, and tool that we employ. It's done slightly different, but the proof the merit of that type of strategy absolutely has been proven in the octagon of the ring, which a lot of people, and of course most people, but you can't prove this, right? It's been proven effective on the battleground, right? A lot of these things they're blood tested. People, this is why. The weaponizing process and rapid assault tactics and things of that nature are utilized by SEAL teams, by special operations forces and law enforcement worldwide, because they're out every day in the street and these things are being either proven effective or ineffective. And if they're ineffective, they get tossed out or revamped, and it goes and so on and so forth. So that's how this process has always stayed on the vanguard of what's functional, because people are actually out there doing it. But you can't flip on TSN and pay $30 or $50 and watch it on a Friday night. It's a different context, so different content. Okay, so anyway, so destructions are good. So you have the attrition-based inner control, the Trojan horse, which is falsehood precedes reality. You got destructions. You try to hit me, it hurts you, and when I hit you, it hurts you. You're creating the double win there. Okay, that's all attrition-based warfare. Okay, let's real quick here, just because I don't want this, I want to make sure we land our plane with this. So let's talk about annihilation. And this will be obviously fairly simple because it's much more straightforward. What is some examples of annihilation-based warfare?
Well, for one, I was going to say our avalanche strategy. I mean, we're talking about when we're looking to put an end to whatever energy's in front of us. We're no longer in this wear them down, piece by piece, little by little kind of mindset. This is where we really shine and where we bring everything we have to bear. We're using the elbows, the knees, eye gouges. Like it's some of the most vicious, effective, tools that the human body has naturally. And so that's when we're just putting everything out there to try and put an end to this energy that's threatening us or our loved ones or whatever it might be. And so then there's a definite shift there into that more annihilation based mindset, because at that point, like, that is kind of all you have. We have nothing else after that. There's no strategy that we're shifting to kind of offer more, I guess, for lack of a better word, to try and put an end to the situation. So I think that's one of the best examples of what we do for sure.
Okay. So before Brad jumps in here, I'm going to throw out a couple things, because what Dustin's talking about is what we call an avalanche strategy, right? And so I'm not going to focus too much on the strategy. I'm going to talk about the tools, but there's three different, types of tools, right? There's natural tools, there's designed, and there's expedient. So if we're going to look at, and I'm about to list some of the tools that take people out of commission. Okay, so annihilation-based warfare. What is the biggest firepower you have? Well, naturally, meaning you have no designed weapon and no expedient weapon. The natural tools on the human body, right? You have the headbutts, the knees, the elbows, the eye gouges. You have choking, wrenching, and biting. Okay, so right, 5 different ways to bite the body. You know, you got over 144 different ways that you can bite on the human body. And yes, you can train the bite. It's not just like a fucking, you know, kindergarten bite. You can train a nibble, not tear, chew, or shred. You can work your bite. It might sound funny to a lot of people, but you can. So you have all of these different things, right? Choking, wrenching, biting, all that stuff. These are the things that take people out. Now, designed. Well, you can shoot somebody, you can stab somebody, you can bludgeon somebody. Okay, so you can have designed knives, designed firearms, you can have designed projectiles like crossbows, all these different things. You could have artillery, you could have explosives, you could have, these are all designed weapons that would absolutely annihilate somebody. I mean, you know, you got to look at the mafia, look at the, you know, the MC clubs, the motorcycle clubs, right? You got somebody you don't want, put a fucking bomb in his car, starts his car, it fucking blows up. That was pretty much a war of annihilation. Okay, there's no wearing them down, there's just fucking nuke them, right? So that's designed. Then you go expedient. Well, you can just take a bottle, break a bottle, slash somebody's throat. You know what I mean? Stab them 50 times. You can, whatever it is, right there. You know, you just go through the list of it. Pick up a cinder block and smash him on the head when he drops to the ground. Just annihilate him that way. Like you can take a plastic bag, take a fucking seatbelt, take a pair of pantyhose, wrap it around his fucking neck, and literally choke him. You know, until he like cut the blood supply off until the fucker's dead. So you can start talking about all these ways and start going, I get it. Just going to annihilate somebody, overwhelm them with force. Okay, so here's the thing. The avalanche strategy, and if we just talk with the natural tools, headbutts, knees, elbows, eye gouges, you know, choking, wrenching, biting. If you just start with those natural tools, you cannot look at what we're doing here and say, okay, what have they said so far? War of attrition. They're talking about inner control, right? They're talking about control. They're talking about falsehood precedes reality with the Trojan horse. They're talking about if you hit me, if you try to hit me, it hurts you. And if I hit you, it hurts you. So the double win with the destructions. And then all of a sudden, there's just this. I say, okay, now that I got the guy, now I'm going to fucking annihilate him. Headbutt, knees, and elbows, tie up, thumb and eyes under pressure, wins fights, you know, choking, wrenching, biting. And then you're just going to fucking barrage him with that. Those two things are separate still. So what we need to talk about is how does attrition-based warfare and annihilation warfare, what is the secret sauce? What's the impetus? What's the catalyst that turns your training into actual warfare, to actual functional, effective warfare? And there's one term. Now there's sub things, but there's one core term that you need to understand. There's the pause for dramatic effect. War of attrition, and then there's war of annihilation. And in between that, war of attrition, you use it to create relative superiority. The second your war of attrition, and the second you understand war of attrition is designed to create relative superiority. The second that you have achieved the state of relative superiority, you transition to the war of annihilation. While in the war of annihilation, the person is not being annihilated. They're not going silently and willingly into the night. That means you're losing relative superiority, which means go back to war of attrition and repeat the cycle. So it is so important that people don't just go, oh, there's attrition-based warfare. I'm sitting back. I'm breaking the guy down. I'm wearing him down. And then all of a sudden you just go, well, he seems fairly worn down. Fucking annihilation. Like it's not just an eclectic switch, you know, flip. You actually go, again, strategy, tactics. And so if you have a strategy and tactic, what's the goal? Well, the goal is to create a moment of relative superiority. So let me just try to maybe give this a quick context, and you guys can throw your 2 cents into this part of it. If I truly am outgunned and outmanned, they're bigger, stronger people. You know, they got the weapons, they got the numbers, they got all these advantages. The deck is heavily, heavily stacked in their favor. I can be doing all these different strategies to try to, you know, survive, wear them down. But if I don't understand what relative superiority actually is, if I don't understand that all of the strategies, tactics, and tools that I'm doing when I'm in attrition-based warfare mindset are not designed to wear them down to the point of collapse, meaning that they're so fucking injured and feebled up, like they're so anesthetized that now I can just annihilate them. That won't work, because if I could do that, then I wouldn't need annihilation. They would be fucking dead, or they'd be worn down. I could just walk away. You actually have to understand that relative superiority is a moment in time. It might be a fraction of a second. It might be a couple seconds. But it is a very, very brief period of time where the deck flips and is now in your favor. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen permanently. So I don't want people to think that, like, you're doing destructions and you're doing, the Trojan horse, the falsehood, and all this stuff. When that works, it's like they're fucked. Like now they're anesthetized. Now they're fucked, because that would be the end of the fight. They're not. It's a moment in time, could be very brief, where the deck flips, and that's what you're shooting for. All things relative, all of a sudden in that moment, even though I'm weaker and I'm smaller and I don't have the same tools and firepower and numbers, all of a sudden for that brief period of time, I actually have some superiority over these people. And then it could be gone. And I have to recognize that. And then I have to work to create that fraction of a second again. So does that make sense, hopefully? Right? And me,
Totally.
It makes sense because
Yeah.
I know what it is, but I just want people to understand, like, you're like, oh man, okay, like, it's like, Paul used to tell me, it's like, violence is like being in the middle of like not in the eye of the tornado, but like you're in a tornado. What's the most dangerous part of the tornado? I mean, it's the wind stuff, but it's the fucking debris. All that fucking debris. Most likely you're going to get hit by the debris, and that's what's going to fucking kill you. And it's like relative superiority is going, there's all this debris, and it's moving at like insane rates of speed. You can't control that. But imagine having some strategies, tactics, tools that for just a moment, just the briefest period of time, you create a hole through that. You create like a portal, a tunnel, a passageway, where you have this relative superiority. And if you understand how to create that and you time it, boom, you can end up in the eye of the tornado, where it's just this calm. And so this relative superiority is for the briefest period at times, I'm actually superior. And in that moment, if I can capitalize and recognize the relative superiority, and then all of a sudden I implement annihilation, what this means is that at the moment or the second that we implement or switch to War of Annihilation, they are at their weakest. They are at their most vulnerable, and those can be two different things. If you have a guy that's, a monster, infinitely stronger than you, and I said, okay, do something to get him at his weakest. What are some things that come to your mind that you could do to take someone that's infinitely stronger, better stamina, I mean, just a fucking superhero of a dude? How do you get him at his weakest? What would you have to do to him? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be fighting related. What could you do?
I'd wait till I knew he was super sick, and then I'd drug him, and then I'd get him while he's asleep.
Okay, that's great too. I meant make him run for fucking 50 days straight or something. You know what I mean? Like make him push 5 cars up a fucking hill. Get him to do his max bench press. Yeah, you know what I mean. But you're 100% right. Like that is also how you could get him at his weakest. Now people just would go. So I just want a context in people's mind to be like, if you got someone that big, that strong, that great a shape, that talented, it's going to take a certain amount of, it's going to take a considerable effort to get him at his weakest. So maybe when our strategies for attrition shouldn't all be based off on making him weaker. Like, because I'd punch him in the head 15 times. And then when he's finally a little discombobulated, he's weaker, now I could get him. Hey, that can work. But you got to punch him in the head 15 times first. If he's bigger, stronger, faster, skilled, got more people, got weapons, you might not get the chance to punch him 15 times in the head. So I just want people to understand that it could work. A guy can fire a punch at you. You roll out, and as you're moving in zone and you replace, the line of attack, you replace that, and your elbow ends up in that, and he happens to hit that just right and shatters, 3 or 4 of his fucking metacarpals, and his knuckles are back up in his forearm, and maybe that's enough. Maybe the adrenaline, and maybe he's on drug. Maybe that's enough. And in that moment, you've severely weakened him, and you can capitalize on that. So yeah, great, it totally can happen. But sometimes if you understand that relative superiority can be gained through many different things. One is to make him weaker. One is to get him when he's vulnerable. Now, Dustin, I like what you said, because everything that you said was to make him weaker, but it also made him what?
Vulnerable.
It made him vulnerable. And here's my big point. I don't want, this is not the point to go this, too deep into the weeds here, but when to understand relative superiority, you actually understand that you're combining things. I want to weaken him. I want to make him more vulnerable. I want to have him distracted. I want to have him disorientated. I want to have him destabilized. Like, those are just 4 core things that I'm trying to achieve. And all of my strategy, tactics, and tools that are based with my attrition warfare mindset, all of those things are working synergistically in combination to achieve each of those 4 things in as much, I'm trying to buy as much as I can. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to get as much as I fucking can from somebody. I would not put all my eggs in one basket, thinking that, attrition-based warfare, I can just make him weaker. I'll just weaken him and wear him down until complete collapse. You don't have that kind of time. You probably don't have that kind of talent, right? You don't have that, and so it's when you stack. And just remember, it's not one stressor that kills us. And therefore, it's not one stressor that kills somebody else, the enemy. It's when stressors are combined and stacked together. That's what overloads the system. So it's when you are attrition-based warfare, the strategy, tactics, and tools are all designed to stack the elements that allow and create opportunity through relative superiority. And you really want to understand what the dimensions and layers of that are. Because once you've done that, then in that moment of relative superiority, when you start throwing and you switch to annihilation, they are weaker, more vulnerable, distracted, disorientated, destabilized. And when those elements are happening, we'll just sum it up to 2 things. They lack base and balance. They lack base and balance physically. They lack base and balance mentally. They lack base and balance emotionally. And when you have somebody in that state, they are what we call a pedestrian. Doesn't matter how tough they are. Doesn't matter how big they are. Doesn't matter what tools they have. Or I should say, it matters significantly less. And so now, as the smaller, weaker individual, when you start throwing those headbutts, knees, and elbows, and eye gouges, and wrenching, choking, and biting, you start working those, or designed with the knives, whatever it is. When you start doing that, you are going to relay more destruction than otherwise ever possible. So it synergizes. And that's the thing I need people to see, is that you have to stack and synergize. This is why what we teach people to do is how to build a kill chain. Because I think of a chain like there's links in a chain. Each link, each strategy, tactic, tool must stack. What's the value of a chain? The chain, each link needs to synergize the next link. They need to be strong. Right? So that allows more force and more pull the more links you have. It spreads it out. So the kill chain, and if you look at this War of Attrition versus Annihilation, it's a synergistic stacking that you're being taught for how attrition is done to achieve relative superiority. Once relative superiority is achieved, you can switch to annihilation. And then that chain, like an accordion, you can go in and out. If the annihilation is, it was effective, but only to a certain degree, you lose in relative superiority, you can go back to attrition, regain relative superiority, back to annihilation, and so on and so forth. And how many times can you do that? As many times as it fucking takes. Shit ain't over till I fucking win. How long does it take? Takes as long as it fucking takes. Shit ain't over till I win. And so now you start to see the value in not, is it attrition-based warfare versus annihilation-based warfare? It is actually a synergy of the two. And sorry, I went a bit of a rant there, but so give me some feedback on what I just said and how you guys experienced that.
Yeah, I know just one thing that it made me really think about, and I know that we talked, and this is kind of just building on
Oh, you're
I know we
muted there,
talked
Brad.
in previous podcasts about um, there's no
You're still muted
best
there.
tool. Oh,
I can hear him.
no, I'm not muted. No, I'm good.
No, I
You
can't
hear
hear
me?
you. Oh, you can hear him?
I can.
Oh, you know
Yep.
what I did? Sorry, Brad, you might never have been muted. My headset got unplugged. Try that.
Can you
Hang
hear
on.
me now?
Nope, I still can't hear. Okay, so you keep
Still
talking,
can,
Brad,
yeah.
because everyone can
Okay.
hear you
Go.
but
Yeah,
me.
Dustin can hear me. I'm good
Fix
to
my
go.
headset.
So what I was saying is like just building on what Greg said is, you know, it really made me think about something we talked about in a previous podcast, and I'm going to use this just as an example where, you know, there's not one best tool, there's not one superior tool. What's the best weapon you have out there? It's like, well, it's a grenade. Well, no, not in an elevator. It's not. You know, so it's like we've talked about that. It made me think about the difference between War of Annihilation and War of Attrition, and it's like one is not superior than the other, right? They're linked to an energy. There is only a better use, a better mindset in a moment of time. It's like if the energy dictates because of, let's say, you were doing like he's broken down this, like now it dictates the shift. And I think that when you understand that there are two elements, there's two sides of the coin. You know, I think where a lot of people may find the challenge is switching from one to the other, right? Because let's say they switch from War of Attrition, the guy's broken down, and they see that relative superiority, they seize the initiative and they go into War of Annihilation. But then there's a second guy that comes in. And it's like, you got to switch because now the energy is dictated. It's like, you cannot just stay in War of Annihilation. You may have to switch back. And this is what Greg was saying. It's like, it's that according. It's you can go in and out of that. But again, it's having that mindset that this is fluid, that combat and violence is very much alive and toxic and corrosive and septic. And if you think that, oh, I'll break them down and then I'm going to kick in the War of Annihilation, I'm just going to stay there, you're missing the point, right? Because it is all linked to what is the stimulus, what is the energy, what is the mission demands in front of you, is what's going to really dictate where you are between those things, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think like just to even sum up kind of everything Brad's saying, the point he's making, with the same thing we say probably every podcast we do, context determines content.
Right.
And we often say it in regards to like the bigger picture, like, oh no, is it violence? Is it sport fighting? Is it martial arts? What is it? We're always saying context determines content, but like even in the realm of violence, like Brad just did a really good job of explaining, it's like in those moments of violence, what is the context, right? Does he still have relative superiority over you? Or do you have it? Is he at his weakest and his most vulnerable for a split second or a few seconds? Or is he still, as strong as ever, as he's still out positioning, he's still out equipping, maybe they're still outnumbering, all that stuff. So it's like, again, context determines content. What's that?
I said, or did we lose it? And they gained relative superiority back on us, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Again, very, very well said. And I think too that like Brad already said it, and Dustin, you echoed it. People get stuck, and the other thing is that people love to play to their strengths.
Yeah.
Like and this we could I don't want to go too deep into this, but this is one of the things. Like why do people choose the self defense system or the martial art or the sport that they choose? You know what I mean? Like now sometimes they choose. It's like they don't feel like they made a conscious choice. Like I know one guy, and he was a great athlete, a great hockey player, and he kind of retired. Now he's young, so he wasn't playing in the NHL, but he was really, really good, and kind of went as far as he could go, kind of farm team level stuff. But he was like, I most likely am not going to go all the way or any further, and just realized that maybe this is the end of it for me. Once there's family stuff. Anyway, so he was like, well, I got to do something. So he just walked into a kickboxing gym, like Muay Thai, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, that kind of thing, but that gym. And the first class he happened to take was Thai boxing. And he was just kind of like, wow, this is fucking fun. And, he did, I tried jiu-jitsu. He liked it and stuff, but he just really, really, really liked the Thai boxing. And the biggest reason he liked it is he really liked that it was a hard fucking workout. He loved the pad work, the bag work. He loved all that stuff. He really enjoyed it. And so I'll just fast forward it, but he is, about to fight for the World Muay Thai Championship, in a 5-fight, $100,000 contract. And it's like, how did he, why did he choose what he chose? Well, he didn't choose it for the fighting. He chose it because he needed to do something. He's an athletic guy. And then, of course, there's that competitive element, being that high-level hockey player. The point is though, my bigger question is, why did he stick with it? Because he's good at it. Why didn't he, get into the MMA? Because clearly an athletic guy like that could be doing just as well in MMA? Why didn't he just get into jiu-jitsu and start just competing in Brazilian jiu-jitsu? He, again, with his talent, he probably could have. But for whatever reason, his predisposition, his character, his nature, his past experiences, all of those factors, he gravitated towards and is excelling in Muay Thai. And most people go, well, what's the matter with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Until you look at violence and the totality of violence and recognize that Muay Thai isn't enough. But he doesn't give a fuck. He's not worried about it. That's not his goal. And so it's okay. That's perfect. But when you're talking about violence, you can't just play to your strengths. You have to actually go, I need to take all of this and make it my strengths. So a war of attrition is not in the wheelhouse for a lot of guys, especially guys that are, athletic, strong, aggressive, alpha type guys, because the war of attrition seems weak to them. It seems soft to them. But at the same time, there's not a single alpha male out there that is the ultimate alpha male. There's not a single alpha male out there that can out alpha male his way out of a pack of wolves. You know what I mean? Like, wolves hunt in packs. So do predatory criminals. There's a reason why wolves hunt in packs. Because it enhances their odds of success for survival. Well, there's a reason predatory criminals hunt in packs. Because it increases the likelihood of their success. Right? So, you get, those are just statements, but it's the thing where it's challenging to really, like you guys are talking about, to be adaptable, to really equally value and learn and engage and take on and identify as an attrition-based warrior. And what I'm saying, and the real ultimate goal of this podcast, was to say that becomes so much easier to do, to go into that, to invest in it, to get excited about it, when you recognize that the end goal is not just to be attrition-based. The end goal is to achieve relative superiority so that you can flip the switch and then become the annihilator. Then it's like the David Blaine, then the illusion is revealed. The magic is unleashed. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's fucking with you and your family and wants to take your life or the life of innocent people, the show-stopping crescendo to that is when you annihilate that motherfucker to whatever legal and moral level is justified. It's not revenge. It's not punishment. It's self-defense. But that can include taking life to preserve life. But you get what I mean? At that point, at some point, you have to annihilate the fucker. Attrition-based warfare by itself will oftentimes take too long, or again, you look at the rope-a-dope, you look at something, where you lull a guy in, you wear him down, and all of a sudden he's weaker, or he's vulnerable, or he's distracted, disorientated, destabilized. Take one of those things, and then at that moment, you have to drop the hammer to make sure that he doesn't get back up or recover and continue to pursue his evil intentions. Does that kind of make sense? So it's there's lots of elements to this, but that's a great one maybe end on, is just that you can't just play to your strengths. Big guys, like to use their size and strength. Well, yeah, because they're a big guy. And there's a time and a place, but you got to be able to round yourself out. You got to be adaptable. Yeah, because at the end of the day, there just is no singular alpha dominant male. There's always someone bigger, stronger, or there's always circumstances and factors that negate your size, strength, speed, capability, right? Like numbers, like environment, like equipment, like positioning, life factor moments. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Our whole goal is to learn to manage those, anticipate those, manage those, control those, use those, right? So, anyways, all right. Any final thoughts, guys?
No, I think you hit all the.
No.
Okay, I think you guys did it. I think it was a great wrap up. I think what you guys just hit was the great wrap up, right? So, all right, guys, let's put a pin in it here for tonight. Great conversation. I honestly wasn't super sure how this would go, simply because these can be esoteric. If there's people listening that aren't super familiar with all of these, maybe don't have any, the experience with this. Hopefully, we did a good enough job of painting a picture and articulating what we're kind of talking about. Because this lies at the root. This synergistic combination of War of Attrition, relative superiority, and War of Annihilation, and how this functions together. I mean, that is weaponizing. That's the core of it, right? So. Just a different way to look at it, right? So, all right, that's it, guys. All right, thanks everybody for watching. Please, as always, like, share, comment. Don't forget to follow us. Leave us a rating if you can. That's how we reach other people. It's how we grow this channel, one warrior at a time, one protector at a time. We're doing it organically. We're not looking for all the people. We're looking for the right people to join us. Lend your voice to it. Let us know your feedback. And that is it, everybody. Until next time, stay safe, stay weaponized. We're going to chat again soon.